Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. My name is Shaylin Scott, founder of Book Mecca, and Book Mecca is an online Black platform that celebrates literacy and celebrates Black books and Black authors and all things Black lit. So as you know, every so often, and we're going to try and make it 3 times a year, we love to talk with our readers. We love to talk with the community about a variety of different topics. And we started a series last year called Brothers Brown and Books, which were Black men talking about literature, life, and everything in between. So today we have a special series that is called, I will make sure everyone can see, Black Mental Health and You. Black men, mental health, how it affects you, all of their thoughts and ideas behind it, and their experiences. And we have a really stellar group. I mean, amazing group of Black men who are coming on today to talk to you about everything. So make sure to get your notepads, and everyone here will be able to see the replay. It'll be recorded, and feel free to share it with all your friends and your contacts. So I will introduce everyone, and then I'll bring everybody up so we can start a discussion. First up, we have Amal Black. He is recently relocated to Dallas, Texas, by way of Memphis, Tennessee. He's an author, personality. He has his own publishing company, I Am All Black Studios. He does communications, and he's an entrepreneur, and he's a teacher at Kingdom Collegiate Academies. So definitely keep an eye on Amal Black. He has some gems he's going to drop tonight. We also have Dr. Solomon Tension is a higher education administrator, professor, entrepreneur, and the CEO of SIM Companies. He's also an author of the King and Me series, empowering men of color to discover who they are and what they love and desire out of life. So you know he has some gems to drop for sure. We also have Zoe Amani. He's originally from Fayetteville, North Carolina, holds a master's in higher and post-secondary education from Arizona State, 2 bachelor's degrees in sociology and consumer studies. He has a background in government and working with economic development and empowering the community, and he is a community advocate. So definitely welcome Zoe to the team for sure. We also have Andre Patterson. He is a multifaceted entrepreneur, a technologist by trade who grew up in Plano, Texas, and now resides in Austin, attended UT, Texas, has a bachelor's in management information systems, and he has quite a few businesses and working with his family as well, everything from arts and music to entrepreneurship. So a well-rounded individual. So thank you so much, Andre, for joining us, and we look forward to it. And last but not least, we have Colby Boone. He's a senior district manager, diverse business channels at ADP, a serial entrepreneur, along with his wife in private business sector. And he's an East North Carolina native with a servant leadership mindset. So we look forward to hearing from everyone today. And I will get us going and give you guys time to chat. So I'll bring everybody up on the screen here. All right. Welcome, welcome, brothers.
Hey, hey.
Hello, hello. How's it going?
Great, great. Good to see all your smiling faces. I love every minute of it. This is one of my favorite moments with Book Mecca is the opportunity to give Black men not just a space to talk about literature, because I always like talking about literature, but a space to just talk, period. A safe space to talk about things that are affecting you in life, your ideas, your influences, and all that in between. So, and it's also a time where I don't do a lot of talking. So this is your forum. I want to make sure this is for you. So I will start it off with an image that I saw, and I want to hear your feedback on it, okay? This is one of the statistics that was provided from the US Census, and this is from 2010 census. The population of the US, 13.4% is African American and Black. Of those, 16% reported to have a mental illness in the past year. And that's combined enough to fill up the populations of Chicago, Houston, and Philadelphia combined. Now, that's kind of a staggering idea and statistic that just kind of caught my eye. What are some of your thoughts just on seeing that? And feel free to unmute yourself and jump right in.
the first thing I want to say is it looks a little alarming. You know what I mean? Because you don't recognize that it's just that many men and brothers are actually experiencing mental illness. In and of itself.
Well, I would contend, and I would bring up, first of all, is it including people that are self-diagnosing? Number one. Number two, I would also call out the fact that being black in America, I would be shocked that the number's not higher.
Oh, okay.
Right. Again, that's the first thought that comes to mind is what do you define as mental illness, right? That's the thing that comes to mind for me.
And kind of speaking back to that, defining mental illness, thinking back to a very first moment that you may have heard that phrase, was it always with a positive connotation or a negative stigma behind it? What was your first instance with even hearing the phrase mental illness or some sort of mental crisis?
Well, I always heard it as crazy, right? You know what I mean? So it immediately had a negative connotation from my point of view.
Oh, I think you muted there, Colby.
Yeah, I was agreeing with Brother Patterson. I would say much the same. And going back to answering the question as well, that same image is one that I have used on events and panels for the last 5 or 6 years as a document. And in my mind, I kind of think about the numbers are probably far more larger than even what was displayed on the image because so many brothers don't go to actually get the help or utilize the resources around them, which I'm sure we'll dive into the cost of those resources as well, but actually have been declared or diagnosed with some type of stigma that is in the array of wheelhouse as well. So when I see that image, I always think about how many silent voices are not being represented on that actual diagram as well. I believe it's NAMI, NAMI. Yeah, that's a very familiar image with me.
Yeah. And then if I can chime in, think just not even thinking about the men, you think about the children who are actually diagnosed, the young boys who are actually still kind of coming into their acknowledgement of mental illness. Some of them don't even recognize that they have anything going on, and some mental illnesses don't hit them until puberty or what have you, even though it's genetic. So that's another thing to consider.
Yeah, I'm not. Was the 13.6% for all African Americans that included men and women?
Yes.
Okay, so it might be less of
Mm-hmm.
men. But yeah, when I think about it, like you all made some great comments. I think about kind of like what Amal's getting at. Like, what's if we disaggregate the data? How would that look for if we just talking about African American men? How would that look for African American men in their youth from like 15 to 20? And maybe that's like the large group that's going underreported. Then I want to think about the midlife crisis, like the 30s era, or then even older men, like and just thinking about different communities. Is
Yeah.
mental health like bigger in urban communities? But it's almost like I think disaggregating that data would be helpful because sometimes we might assume that it's an inner city thing. But I'm thinking that some brothers out in rural areas that are struggling with mental health just as much as brothers in urban areas. But I definitely think that the underreported thing that the other guys brought up is probably the hardest part because like where do you get a survey? I
Mm.
haven't gotten a
Yeah.
survey.
Yeah.
Like,
Exactly.
how do you know? Like, do you have to call into a government agency or nonprofit to
Right.
say, "Hey, I'm dealing with something," and then they count you? So that's
Yeah.
where I'm at with it, guys.
Well, I know I have a question
Yeah.
for all of you. Mental health, especially in the Black community, is not one that is talked about heavily or frequently. Um, and I do not proclaim to be a mental health expert at all. I don't know if either one of you are, but I don't proclaim to be one. I have my own personal experience and my own thoughts behind it. But I was curious as the topic that came up, not everyone is open to talk about. Why were you interested in even bringing your voice to the table?
Mm.
Yeah, I think that mental health has impacted my life personally. Variety of family members who have struggled with mental health. and that's caused me to be more aware when you kind of understand how certain things are in the bloodline and how it's generational. So that's the first piece. But I think secondly, just really understanding for me what our role is as men. And I posted about it on my IG about our role in terms of being in purpose, as well as breaking generational cycles and leading our families and being leaders in the community, in industries, and in business. Those are all really important roles, but
Yeah.
you can't do those, in my opinion, we can't do those things effectively as men if we don't also focus on our mental health. And so, because that's my
Yeah.
core belief that that is what my purpose is as a man, that's another reason that makes me not only continuously work on it, but also uh, be open about communicating and speaking about that, because I think that when men really have the opportunity to see that full picture, it might cause an opportunity to say, man, you know what? There's some areas that I have been charged to lead that I haven't led well because I haven't taken care of myself. So those are
Mhm.
kind of my thoughts around that.
Solomon, you bring up a good point. And I think a lot of times, we use the term mental health in a very ambiguous way, right?
Mhm.
Because it means a lot of things to a lot of different people. I mean, we automatically go to mental illness, right?
Yeah.
Which to me, calls out a condition of some sort. But I
Mhm.
think overall, especially within the Black community, and particularly with Black men, we're not socialized to process our emotions very well,
Mhm.
right? And because of that, that comes out in all different sorts of ways. And so what drew me to the topic was this is something that I've been, spending a lot of time on over the past, couple years, self-evaluating,
Mhm.
self-processing, trying to figure out, you know, how do I reassess what society has told me what being a Black man should be, right?
Right. Right. Right.
Because I have a son, right? I have a son, and we're starting to see little blips on the radar of people saying things like positive things. Men can cry, right? It's okay to be a man and can cry, this, that, and the other. But it goes so much further than that, right? When you start peeling back the layers. So this in particular, beyond just conditions, right, of mental illness, is a such more, it's a wider spectrum as to us Black men having more conversations. One thing that I'm noticing, I don't know if you gentlemen are noticing the same thing, I've gotten so many invites
Mhm.
from different Black men starting their own little subgroups, right?
Okay.
Where they're like, the women have their, I attended something. I'm down here in Austin. It was a big deal because there's not that many Black people down here, and they call it bro
Oh.
brunch, right? And they basically say, the women have a party for everything. We need to have our own brunch. And it was amazing when you got all of us together. A lot of men are realizing now that this socialized behavior of us being told that you're supposed to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and just suck it up and be a man and this, that, and the other. They're realizing that they're needing this camaraderie. And so it wasn't just me, right? And so
Mhm.
from that perspective, it's really humbling. And I appreciate the fact that a lot of men now are to the point where they realize, look, we need to be a lot more relational. We need to be a lot more communicative with one another. And we're starting to see that. I'd open up to the panel to see if you guys have seen those same type of invites, because
Yeah.
I'm getting one every week.
Yeah, oh, really? Well, that'll be nice. Honestly, I'm looking for more sectors to go into, well, groups to go into and to talk about it. But one thing that's led me to this conversation and just this topic in general is my own personal relationships. I feel like as I get older and I experience certain things, I'm having to draw back sometimes and be very introspective sometimes and like look at the things that I've been through. So like the traumas from childhood and how those things impact how I deal with people today, and how either I'm trying to utilize those things as lessons or utilize those things as tools as a way to not go back into the same patterns. So for me, I love this topic because I'm still trying to grow. I'm still trying to learn. I'm still trying to relate to people and do it the right way, and not in a way that's going to be either toxic for someone else or in a way that's going to allow for me to be vulnerable to other people, you know what I mean, in their own toxic behaviors. So it's a shield in a way. The more communication I have about it, the more knowledge I get, and I can kind of utilize it better. So I would say personal relationships and my own emotional maturation. You know what I mean? We're still all trying to you mature emotionally, and it's a process that should always be in progress. You know what I mean? Because at every stage, you kind of figuring out what happened last level, how I can take it to this next level, and then build on top of that. So, that's really what draws me to this topic. It's very intriguing because I'm living it every day and I'm using it every day. You know.
You muted there. Well,
Oh,
there you go.
Oh, I'll jump in. Okay, thanks for the alley oop, Kobe. Appreciate it.
right.
Hopefully, I can slam dunk this. But yeah, this is a great topic for all the reasons the brother said earlier and more. I'm pretty sure if we had 100 black men on here, we get a lot of different perspective, especially across the age spectrum, especially across the geographic lines. People in New Orleans and the South is a little different from the North and the West. And basically, one of the main reasons I'm interested in this is the whole, financial literacy, financial education standpoint of it, and how that contributes to stress in the household and black men and women, our place in a capitalistic society historically, as over time, how that has kind of played into how we see ourselves, how we value ourselves when we look in the mirror. And that really says a lot about how we look in the mirror and say, hey, you know what? I'm not good enough. Or like this whole value proposition of our skin and where we're situated in society, in a capitalistic society, that really affects us. And a lot of times I'm looking at some of this financial literacy stuff and I hear young people talk about they don't want to struggle like their parents. And in that statement, there's a lot that's happened, as you all have seen in your own lives or around with your friends. It's like some of those conversations about what parents tell kids they can or cannot do, relate to finances and how they can manage their finances and the stresses that come along with one, getting a job, but then two, being able to invest or save or, put put money away for your kids to go to college and all those other things. So that's one of the reasons I'm interested in it, the financial literacy, financial education standpoint, but also the emotional duress. And I think a lot of times we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to make up for lost time, or our grandparents, our ancestors didn't have these opportunities, so we got to go above and beyond to make up for that. And I think that's great motivation at times, but I think sometimes that can also be like something that's holding us back too, where we're like running our heads into a wall. And like we got to realize that making money over time and putting our families together, a lot of that stuff is going to take time. We can't try to fix these things overnight. So I know I kind of rambled a little bit, but definitely the financial aspects and the emotional aspects of mental health.
Solomon, did you get an opportunity? All right, cool. I would just say, for me, the conversation is so aligned with my life from being a two-time suicide attempt survivor. And I think I think in general, man, when you look at how the world is kind of taking this is a loaded answer. How the world is kind of taking this vehicle of mental health and using it to defend so many different things that aren't even fixated or rooted in the actual industry of helping individuals that are suffering with mental health. And we just kind of label it on so many different things. Organic conversations like this, where professionals in various arenas can come together and talk about their own personal experiences. I'm sure everybody on this call has a therapist or is currently in therapy. If not, we all should be. But in that, I think like when we have these opportunities to come together in various different arenas, then now we can collectively look at what's affecting us all, especially within our communities, and come up with solutions. We know our folks. We're big on doing a lot of talk, not always walking the walks. And I believe, as Zoe was saying, I think that brother's from Eastern North Carolina too, so that's home. Uh, I think what's so important is that we do combine, you know, the health, the doing well portion of it, and then also how do we get people in a position where they can afford a $60 sliding scale for a therapy session or $120 sliding scale, or maybe you were in my case where you were supposed to go see a psychiatrist, but you didn't have $250 to go see somebody because you didn't have a job, which was part of your situation, the issue that was going on. Because if you had a job, you'd probably be in a better place. So there's so many different arenas. A good paying job. Don't get me preaching tonight. Like, so there's so many different arenas and things that we're struggling with when it pertains to mental health and specifically coming to men, that I'm just excited to be able to be with a phenomenal men tonight to unpack, because oftentimes in the conversation we're left out. And then those who are invited to the conversation aren't those who in many cases have been through some of the traumas that we have lived through and have to deal with on a daily basis. So then now, if the individuals who do like me are unpacking this conversation from a corporate point of view, and they didn't have that background that many African Americans live in these different arenas of life within the United States and the experience, then now you're having a conversation from one particular perspective. So if we pull 6 different perspectives together, maybe we'll get a vast array of the truth as opposed to only a portion or a tip of the pencil.
Well,
Ooh.
I want to weigh in just a little bit. And
That's
Kobe,
the point, sir. That's the point. Sorry, I had to unmute. Yeah.
yeah, no, you brought up a phenomenal point. I think one of the things that we also need to reiterate, and this kind of ties to what Zoe is leading to as well around capitalism, right? That's also what sent me down this path of kind of rediscovery over these past couple of years. Is we're held to a standard that's not really ours, right? And I think oftentimes we get caught up in that. I mean, especially being a Black American, there's a lot of irony in what we consider success. And so, even though Kobe, to your point, a particular person may not have those specific traumas, I guarantee someone in their family has, right? I mean, you one step away from some family member going through something that, and we don't talk about it. It's not a part of the zeitgeist as far as making it okay to really say I'm not okay, right? What do we always say when someone says, "How are you doing?" "Oh, I'm good. I'm good." And you got to ask at least 3 times before you get a real answer. So I just want to weigh in on that one.
And if I could just kind of piggyback off what you were saying, I didn't think about the financial aspect or the the capitalistic part of it all. But when I think about it, I remember when we were just talking before we had the conversation, I was saying, well, I had a day, you know what I mean? Y'all asked, you know what I mean? I said, oh, it was kind of that one of those kind of days. And it was a very short answer because it's a very endearing answer. I think everyone just kind of uses that because, that's just how we try to skip past having to decipher whether or not someone really truly cares, whether or not you had a good day or not. But as it pertains to how the day was, part of my frustration, even with work, as you say, is the pay rate and the responsibilities, the scale, like the responsibilities out, being more expensive than what you get paid. And, as a teacher, and when you think about also too self-value, self-worth and what that you should be paid as, and then you're having to again be judged, or not necessarily judged, but paid on a societal rate. Like a teacher, a lot of people do believe that teachers should be getting paid way more than we do. I am one of those people who believes that. I'm like, you know what? I shouldn't have to struggle like that. You know what I mean? Or I shouldn't have to try so hard. But that is yet another thing that weighs on the mental. It's one of those things. I go home and I'm like, you know what? I could be doing so many other things, but you get trapped in a space with teaching because you love the kids. You know what I mean? If it wasn't for the kids, I'd be gone. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, if I didn't have to, do this, do that, it would be another story. So I do appreciate you for bringing up that financial aspect of, mental health, because I didn't think about that, but that's something that me and my coworkers talk about all the time. And really, it's probably one of the biggest stresses that we have that we don't consider to be a part of what our mental trauma is from being employees for somebody else. So
Great points from everybody for sure. I have plenty of graphics here that definitely cause you to think. One in particular, you're all talking about generations and making these changes. There's one young lady who does a lot of support and working with people on becoming more healing beings and not just human beings, constantly evolving to change and shift and grow. And look at it as it's a process, just living life. But I'm sure you've all heard the phrase hurt people hurt people. But what do you do when you are healing and the people around you are not healing? How do you interact with those people without feeling like you are doing therapy to them?
It's deep right there. I need a second.
Detach. It's important. I think that you got to be able to detach from people and not feel bad about it. Some people will try to make you feel bad about it, but at the end of the day, you have to do stuff for you sometimes, and that's just it, So I say deal with them from a distance, give them their time, but then take your time as well. So yeah.
Amal, I think that's something that we know that a lot of people have stated. But again, going back to being black in America, for those that have quote unquote made it, I'm using air quotes, right? Again, you got family members that surround you that there's expectations that people use the phrase crabs in a barrel, or you take your pick as to what analogy you want to use, but it's easier said than done. Because at the end of the day, when I'm talking to my colleagues, especially in corporate America, a lot of them don't understand the concept of, even though I may be making decent money and good money, I'm either having to help a cousin pay a bill, or pull somebody else up out of jail for whatever reason. And so it's toxic, and you are kind of doing therapy on top of that. So, it's draining. And I think that's something that we need to get back to, the community aspect. It's not just on you, right? And black men are constantly being sold that bill of goods of, back to what Zoe was saying, I'm a failure, right? If I'm not making enough, or I'm not able to hold it down, then I'm not measuring up. And because of that, I think that's something where it's yet again reiterating the fact that we need one another, and we're not placing enough emphasis on that piece. Is like, you bring your brothers in, right? You bring your brothers in and say, look, this is what I'm dealing with the fam or with friends and this, that, and the other. I'm going to need you all to kind of help support me and let people know what's going on with you. And so I think that's also a good way to combat things, is being vulnerable to your peeps.
I agree. I agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah, I see where both of you all are coming from. It's like, on one hand, you want to detach from the people who are hurting you, and on the other hand, you want to reach out and be vulnerable to people who might be able to support you. As Kobe was mentioned earlier about, therapy, and if, just maybe if somebody in your partner, like your group, can't help you, maybe they give you $30, $60 to go see a therapist. I don't know what the rates are, but you know, I think that's a conversation we got to have. And I was actually thinking about that, Kobe, like grants and other resources to provide to people, and in communities with people who are struggling, just grants or just resources to go see a therapist and have like a one free consultation session. Maybe not free for the counselor, but free on the participant, just to kind of, so, because sometimes people are like looking in the mirror and say, "Am I crazy?" Because a lot of times people look at people who are suffering with mental health and just kind of get label them as they're crazy, they're out of their mind, they don't understand something. And more than likely, they're dealing with a problem that a lot of us have dealt with. And yeah, so I see what you all are saying. On the one hand, it's like, let's detach from the people who are hurting us. On the other hand, is figuring out who I can get help from, because sometimes it's hard to separate, especially if you're living with people that's hurting you, or you dependent upon them financially, or y'all in the same neighborhood. you know.
You all hit the nail on the head. Mental health is a spectrum. There's from simply having a bad day to having full on crisis, in all in between. And the one thing that I always come across people is, when you're talking about mental health, it always kind of goes to, you need something, it's important, something has happened to you. When sometimes they don't ask you why you go to the doctor. You go for a checkup, you go for your annual. You ask for a therapist, you ask for a counselor. Perhaps I just need to talk to someone on a regular basis. And that's okay too. It's open. I wish it was just as understood and accepted as it is as going to your regular doctor every year.
But Shay, wouldn't you say, and part of the challenge with that is, are there enough therapists, especially black ones, right? To support the demand. And I would
Yeah.
contend that they ain't.
I always live from a mindset of abundance. So I say yes, there is. And we're gonna give people resources too. Because if everybody knows me, there's a support system and a resource for everything that exists that you could possibly think of. And so if you don't get anything from today's conversation, even if you watch it later, you'll at least know of one resource that you can go to. And I even try and tell all my family and friends, if they don't listen to me now, put the bug in their ear for some time in the future. Perhaps they
Yeah.
may move towards that.
And maybe it's one of those things where like a space where like say for instance you're not a clinical therapist but yet you situate you have like a seminar or this training thing that you do for a lot of different people who maybe they can take these tools home to the people that they love and use them there because they can't afford to go to a real doctor or whatever the case may be. I know that that's really but at the same time it might work, but again, like you say, the supply and the demand ratio, I don't know, is quite a few of us out there, so
Yeah.
And I think just to add to that, something that I always try to communicate is that therapy might look different for different people, depending upon where you are. And I think if we educate people about the different types of therapy, if you want to go to clinical route or other healthy approaches, if that's life coaching, if that's having a mentor, a coach, a sponsor. For some people, therapy, they have therapy dogs and they have all different. So I think, journaling, there's all different types of avenues to work through your emotions, or if you need to be able to talk that through. And so I think if people understood that, they would kind of be more inclined to it. Just kind of my opinion as well. But I do think that we need more persons of color who want to be in that space.
I'm glad you mentioned all that because there is one thing I definitely want to share with everyone. Have you all heard of the term bibliotherapy? Little bit, some, little bit. Well, I'm going to show everybody here what exactly that is, and talking about the range of the different types of counseling and therapy and support for your mental health that may look different for everyone, just like Solomon said, but bibliotherapy is one of those resources too. And it's truly a practice of using reading as a form of therapy. There's self-help bibliography, there's creative, there's informal, and it's using the literature that speaks to you, whether it's going through a particular topic or a hard time in your life. And it doesn't have to be a step by step, you need to work on XYZ. Sometimes it's a fictional story that you relate to that helps you to think about what's going on in your life or how you can make choices. And if you don't know, all of my Book Mecca fans out there and readers, a lot of the books that deal with mental health or that have some really tough conflicts within them often will have resources in the back of the book on uh, therapy, on resources in your area, on self help books, on good topics that are follow ups, and also on where they get their reference material from, too. So if you're uh, attracted or if you relate to a character or a situation in a book, kind of dig through the back of the book there and you can find some amazing resources too.
That's an incredible point.
Well, I definitely wanted to drop that on everybody. I got a few more graphics I wanted you guys to take a look at too. And this is related to, let me see which one. A little bit closer. 1 in 5 African Americans are 20% more likely to develop a mental illness during their lifetime than white counterparts. And 1 in 25, 4% of the UT student population is African American, but the suicide ranked is the third leading cause of death in Black men from ages 15 to 24. Another quick graphic here was dealing with Black men and mental health disparities and the things that can cause or that kind of lead to the stress or having some sort of mental crisis. It can be simply from systemic racism, from discrimination, violence, poverty, life in general. As a Black man growing up, were there, I know you're probably going to tell me, yes, there were times when it was okay to say, you're not okay. At what point growing up did you feel the need to shut that off? Or did you feel the need that it was okay, that it wasn't okay to talk about your feelings, or that it wasn't a comfortable experience? Or I could be wrong. You may have had an experience of always feeling open and vulnerable. Because at some point between running to your mama at 4 and 5 and 18, there's a difference between there. Don't I'll jump in.
You throw a lot out there.
I'm trying to give everyone else a chance to, because I'm processing it too
That's a
myself.
lot.
Yeah.
This is good though. I'll step back too. Somebody else can jump in.
Are you asking us to be vulnerable? No, I'm just playing.
I
This is
mean,
a safe space. I don't want you to go into any area that you don't want to go into.
Yeah.
I'll pop it off for the team, man. So I would say no, like at any point. So we say it's now the coin term is it's okay to not be okay. But then I always think about the other side of the spectrum was like, can you afford to not be okay? And affordance is not always related to just finance, but can your safety afford
Mhm.
for you to be able to be that vulnerable in the case? I'll give you an example. So bullying when I was in middle school, growing up in Clinton, North Carolina, was like super hard for me. I had cousins who were Bloods. I had cousins who were Crips. They went to 3, 4 different schools. Got family that's in LA and Inglewood. Like growing up in North Carolina, and I am the youngest on the panel today. Even in an era where social media was just maybe coming about on the rise later in high school, or we had Facebook and things of that nature. So anti-bullying was like a slang that it was still very much so taking place. So when I think about like conversations that I wanted to have with my mother about getting jumped in the locker room by like the seniors, for example.
Mhm.
At that point, I was fighting back. I would say middle school, like when you're the eighth graders or something like that. You're in sixth grade or whatever the case may be. Having an older sister, having parents who had me at 40, and this is no knock to my parents, but they know when I jump on these panels, I'm gonna keep it real. Having parents who were so far removed, their childhood experiences were so different than kids that grew up in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, whatever the case may be. So they were still meeting in the front yard and your grandmama outside on the porch, y'all get to duke it out. Whereas you dealing with kids who's bringing guns to school, like knives to school, like they really living that life. For real, I grew up outside of like Fayetteville, North Carolina. So like I say that to say in many cases there were things that you maybe didn't even want to share, especially as a man, that
Mhm.
hey, this is what I'm dealing with, because at the end of the day, it's like, man, you ain't gonna deal with these people. Like
Yeah,
I
exactly.
know my dad at work, he can't do nothing. Like if your pops was around, so it's like at the end of the day, who do I run to? I'm gonna run to my cousins. Like I'm gonna run to whoever's closer in that age that I feel like can understand where it is that I'm actually coming from. So again, I would just for my little tidbit I would add is say in some cases I feel like a lot of us have buttoned up our issues or our problems, not so much that we feel like we couldn't share with our loved ones, our parents, our grandmother, but like, what would they do if I
Yeah.
didn't? You can't do nothing. It's
Mhm.
one of those things where it's just like, well, I'm gonna have to figure it out on my own. And the painful part of that for many young men that I feel is like some do figure it out on their own.
Mhm.
Round of applause,
Yeah.
warrior spirit, whatever you want to call it. But there's many who don't. And then what they have to become in the process to be able to survive what they have experienced, you don't start to unpack until you 25, 35, 45, or never.
Mhm.
So like now who have I become from the little boy that got bullied or the little boy that got molested or the kid that never got over the issue or of codependency or whatever the case may be. and you've created this avatar, if you will. If y'all just let me rock for a couple seconds, I'm gonna land it. Like you've created this avatar, like an online type thing in your childhood, and now you're living in that avatar in a world that Brother Patterson already said wasn't created for us. So you get lost in the sauce because the avatar worked. I'm here today. It worked. What I created myself to be, it helped me. It got me out of the 910 to Dallas, Texas, whatever the case may be. But you're always at every level having to create not only a new version of yourself, but rediscovering what avatar is going to work today. And then you step out in the world and get smacked and find out as long as that avatar has this face, it really truly ain't gonna work regardless anyway. So now you're back to square one of saying it's okay to not be okay. But can I afford to not be okay, even in the conversations and the spaces that I'm in where I'm supposed to be good, because nobody's gonna pay the same attention to me and the avatar that I wear as the folks whose avatar maybe doesn't look like mine. And that's where I feel like when it comes to solutions and the conversations that we have, we got to unpack the identity of who we are and that self-discovery early on for young kings to be able to realize exactly who they are as an individual and person and realize that that's going to change. As what Brother Patterson was saying, like you can heal in the same areas of if you can heal in areas of broken people. And the way that you do that is by combating the understanding of when you receive that revelation that I'm broken and the people around me are broken as well. Hey, I would have never known I was broken if I had never been exposed to something that wasn't whole. So now that I realize that I'm around people that are not whole, I have to change my taste buds, and mine is through faith. I'm a Christian, but my taste buds have to change in which I understand what whole is and want whole. We got people that are so sick that they love being broken and they hate the idea of being whole because it ain't as fun as being broken. And we got a system that's built around you staying broken instead of you getting emotionally whole, physically whole, financially whole, every other version of whole. So then you're like, you don't even know you're sick.
Right. Yeah.
Well, Kobe, I want to weigh on that.
I know, man.
No, yeah. I mean, that was phenomenal. And I think you take it a step further because notice it's in that, and what you called out was when I figured out or when I had that epiphany, right? Well, at what point in time, there's a phrase, I'm a part of an organization called the 100 Black Men, right? And, the tagline is, what they'll see is what they'll be. I love that, right? Because at the end of the day, it's, are you then going to that next step to then take what you've learned and bring that back to the youth, right? And I think that's oftentimes what's missed is that that notion of, and I think it was mentioned before during one of the bios, that servant leadership or that idea of, okay, I wish I knew then what I know now, but since I didn't, let me go ahead and carry that on forward to these young men, young women that are coming up and bestow some of that wisdom on them. And I think, that's the piece that's consistently missing or has been in the past. But I would contend that that's changing, right? I would say that that's changing a little bit because, people are realizing that they started waking up. When we bring up the George Floyd thing that happened, there's a lot of folks that I've talked to that had some crisis that summer. And it wasn't just related to the act of his murder. We've seen and witnessed those types of things happen a long time. What was really called out was, well, damn, I thought my white friends thought differently. There was a lot of wake-up calls with that. And actually, there was a lot of people that experienced loss of friends, family, because they really got a glimpse as to the brokenness of this country, right? And so I think out of that, it requires us to realize and say, look, no one's going to come and quote unquote save us, right? So that means that as we learn these things, the onus is on us to bring ourselves up and bring our legacies up as well. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. I mean, this kind of goes back to, what Brother Boone was saying. I think, when you said, like, who can I run to and why should if I run to you, am I adding to the trauma that you're going through. You know, as a parent, some of the things that that if as a child, I mean, if you express that this is what you're going through, it may cause your parent trauma, which then again makes you in fear of being the straw that breaks the camel's back or the family's back. You know what I mean? And that kind of target on your back does stay with you for a long time because you go around feeling like, yeah, I do have a lot to talk about. But then again, just like you got a lot to talk about, everybody else in your family got something to talk about. And mind you, it could be a domino effect that could either uplift the family or really tear a family apart. And so you don't want to be the person to do either of that. So you do go along you choose an avatar, like you said, and I love that analogy. You know, you choose an avatar to rock with for as long as you can until you decide to transform yourself again. Till you get to a certain point where you are of this understanding that this is just how I have to be. This is how life is. You know, I have to transform as the current does. And being able to do so is not a bad thing. Like you said, sometimes you have to be okay with knowing that that's what you have to do. And it's not like, and you know how some people will be like, oh man, you being fake, or oh, you not being yourself. I kind of can't stand when people say be yourself, because again, for one, who are you to tell me who I am? You don't even know who I'm not being. So that being the case, it's like I don't want to focus on being myself. I want to be who I have to be right now in order to survive. And I think that that's like the mentality that a lot of us kind of live life by. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, I don't think. You know, I feel like you got to do what you got to do. You know, as a man, I feel like, as my folks would say, do what you got to do. You know?
Speaking of that survivor mentality, there's a quite a few books that speak to that, or and not necessarily surrounding everything from economics, the survivor mentality, from being a black man and having that to being a single mom. All of those different areas, there are different books that talk about it. But when we're talking about it, and one thing that's really popular right now is self-care and
Yeah.
taking care of yourself, or selfish care. And that can mean a lot of different things as well. So when you're trying to get out of that mindset, or you're trying to make yourself feel better, or to get yourself in a positive mind, what are some things that you do personally, or what are some suggestions that you could provide to others that may be helpful to others who are watching? Because I know self-care for everyone is not a massage. Self-care for everyone is not going to get your nails done or toes done for everybody, but it varies. So what are some things that may be working for you, and it just may be temporary, but it just helps?
Mhm.
Yeah, so just to share, so for me, I'm a big gym person, and so I found that's my space. I work out every morning around 6 a.m. Before I kind of do anything, and it's a good time for me to just it's me and the weights, or if I got my trainer, it's we working out, and it's a great opportunity for me to not think about the day, but kind of get myself prepared for the day. And so I think that I would encourage brothers to do any activity that causes you to disconnect. And so for me, I love to travel. I'm a big cigar and whiskey person, so I'm always taking
Okay.
that time to go to a cigar bar, drink, whiskey or things that I enjoy, or I love hiking. So just things that cause you to just disconnect from your day to day, and opportunities for you to reflect on who you are as well. And I
Mhm.
think that, as you said, all of that is going to look different. I think that's the reoccurring theme that brothers should look for. And I think even in my life, and I didn't really focus on self care until I think COVID forced us all. But for me, and I'm in my 30s, so I
Right.
spent my 20s grinding and being a
Mhm.
workaholic and doing the things that people say that you should do at that time period. And so it's still new for me as well, but I think it's definitely been helpful.
Mhm. Mhm. I enjoy the arts. You know, I love creative things. You know, I like to find different ways to express myself, and I write music, I record music, but then I like to write and tell stories, and I like to do all those little artsy things that kind of allow you a chance to express the confusion, express your story or tell your side of the story, if so to speak. But then also too, I was looking at some other things where I noticed I do these things, but I didn't know that they were as therapeutic as in that everyone was doing these things. But like cleaning your space, like when you declutter your household and just cleaning your bedroom, washing clothes, wiping down the counters before you go to bed, like making sure that like before you lay down at night, your place is just kind of wiped down and all of that. It's kind of like clearing out a restaurant after thousands of people have been in it all day. All that energy in one space in one day is a lot. So making sure that you wipe all that down and cleaning the slate for the next day, I think is important. So that's one thing that I try to do too.
Kind of speaking of energy, I love the energy that you guys bring to the conversation and just your openness and your transparency and honesty. I love that. One thing that really catches my eye is I wish I could just kind of see into your lives and see
Yeah.
the brothers who are your friends, the young people who you are around. If you see them hurting, what do you say to them? Like, how do you go to someone if you see that they may need extra support? Is it
Mhm.
more of, let me take you along, or is it going to a group or a platform like this or sharing information? What are some ways that you would want to provide some support?
I'll say I just had a conversation yesterday with one of my mentees. I was telling you that on a one off yesterday, and the way that I kind of opened up that call was like, bro, first and foremost, I'm gonna speak to you real because that's how I can give it. I did not complete my degree at UNC Charlotte to become a licensed professional counselor. My love and heart goes out to all those who did. When I realized how broken, how long you had to be to get into that field, I realized that field wasn't for me. So I'm gonna be on a different side of that mission, which is running my nonprofit. And in our conversation just yesterday, when I was talking to the young brother, I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna keep it honest. I'm gonna keep it real, but I want to also allow you the opportunity to speak first. If you need a voice, I'm gonna be that person to be a fly on the wall in the conversation. But if I hear you capping, then I'm gonna call you out on it, and I'm gonna remind you that, hey, you open up the conversation to have some tough love and be real, but also somebody who's gonna love you enough to be honest." And I think oftentimes that's where most often guys of all ages, I got guys who are in their 30s who might tap in with me, and I'm 26. They need that love that can be both nurturing but also corrective as well. Because oftentimes we go so long without having correction, whether you're missing a father or without missing a mentor or somebody who can speak to you in that nature. The issues that you might be dealing with could be within your wheelhouse of your control, but without proper direction with that, again, exposure leads to expansion, right? Like without having that aspect of it, you don't see what you could grow into or morph into outside of the area that you're feeling vindicated. So without a lot of big words, I always start off with the real tip. And I think that is probably the best part of therapy and counseling that I've ever experienced with the four therapists I've been through. And any real conversation with a friend was like, hey, first and foremost, let's keep it real. And in the process of getting naked in that space of the conversation, then you can be like, hey, you don't wear that. I know you. I've been with you for 10 years, or I've been around. You don't wear that. Let's get back to what you actually usually are in. This is you're most comfortable. You're smiling more when you're in this. Whatever you put on, as Brother Black was saying throughout the day, whatever you put on that counter that typically isn't on your counter, some way, form, or fashion, you're wearing something that's not you. And only way I'm gonna be able to tell that is if you step outside of that, outside of yourself in the conversation to get naked, so I can tell you like, hey, that don't fit you. That don't fit you. So you got to be real. You got to be honest. It's just like putting on a bad dress, Miss Scott, and somebody you looking at somebody like, girl, that ain't you. Says, nah, that ain't it. It's the same thing when having those conversations with brothers. It's like, hey, bro, that ain't you. So let's have a conversation to be real with each other. And that accountability, I'll stop because I can talk all day. That accountability is where we as men gotta do a better job because we'll feel like it's not our place. And society has told us that you can't correct another man. Um, I just thought I came and saying this is a whole other conversation for another day. But like
That's-
society has created that now where we're afraid to correct each other because we're afraid we might go to blows or whatever the case may be. Sometimes it might take that to be able to
well,
say something.
I think a lot of that stems from your own insecurity, right? It's like,
Mhm.
who am I? Who am I to say, what you are doing and doing wrong, doing right? But you called out something that's real important. Like you said, hey, I know what you normally are wearing, right? You don't wear that. It requires you to be attentive. And I think we have so
Come on, Jeff.
many more distractions now than ever before, right? And it came to a head during COVID, right? We saw how many distractions that we were missing, so we filled it in with that, with all this other stuff. You got social media in the mix. You got all these different forms of engagement without realness, and so a lot of times, I think it's going to require us to be real, right? To your point, Brother Boone and Brother Black, and also be attentive. Sometimes it's okay to shut up, right? Shut up and listen, like for real. And
Yeah.
don't wait for the first, second, and third response, right? You let them sit in for a little bit and then they'll open up with the real response. So you can get past all the protocols and the niceties and this, that, and other and say, no, for real. For real, I really want to know how you feel, right? And so the onus really falls on us, the individual, back to what you were saying, being, holding others accountable, but yourself as well, to say, are you really engaged with this person, or are you just waiting for your time to let them know what you need? Right? And so that's my 2 cents.
Let me jump in here really quickly because y'all touched it on. I mean, this conversation is amazing, touching on some great points. And I think men to men sometimes, you think about celebrities or I think about the NFL. I play sports at Virginia Tech. I'm a baller. It's in my blood. I love it. And I think about the situation with Henry Ruggs and some of these other guys in the NFL and even college football. And I think sometimes, especially with the very in masculinity, very like macho areas of sports, and it's like sometimes when you're talking to a brother, it's not right, but sometimes we're afraid to say, "Hey, that's not right," because it's not cool. And I think that's something we got to talk about as black men. We got to stop like turning our head away from stuff that we see our brothers doing that we know is not right, because we don't want to be seen as cool. We don't want to be kicked out the cool kids club or whatever. And I think that is something that we can do. That's a solution that we all should take to heart. And it's hard, to tell your brother, like, hey, you know what? You shouldn't treat that woman that way. And that's my second point here. A huge part of black mental health is black women health and our relationships with them. And I know we haven't touched on that. We need another hour or two for that one. But that's a huge part too, because a lot of times, men might take their stresses out on women. I think that crosses all cultures, all races, all walks of life. But how we see ourselves sometimes impacts how we treat women, and we just got to step up and say stuff isn't right, especially as it pertains to how we support and treat black women who are 9 times out of 10 or more really rooting for us to win more than anybody else on this earth outside of us.
Right.
Did you see my reel?
What real?
Said, Black King, we are not your enemy. We are trying to be your energy.
Yeah, and
I got something. I got something for Zoe on that too, man. I gotta share, man. I know we having a conversation, so y'all feel free to come off mute, whatever the case may be. Let me just throw this in the wheelhouse. Is our community so communal? So let me bring it to my life. All right. So every significant traumatic situation I've had in life, except for the most recent relationship, which is my marriage, I've been in some type of fight in life, like some type of struggle in every aspect of my journey to like marriage, right? And in every one of those, I had a woman that was my girlfriend that was in that space that I was sharing a lot of those experiences and struggles with. So a black woman has always been a part of like my growth and my journey. And when our time expired, it was done. You don't get to possess people, you only get to experience them, whatever, right? So if we're talking about like mental health and how it also, and I'm just imploring this to you brothers, let's talk. Like, at what point does your journey have to become a self journey that you can take that walk to realize your own toxicity of self without the presence of another woman? Because I would say throughout my own experiences, again, I grew more when I was homeless, sleeping on my sister's couch in Charlotte, North Carolina, figuring it out in 2018, 2019, than I did at any other space that I had a woman who made it more comfortable because I could stay at her house, or we was in college, or I'm laid up on getting whatever, and she let me drive her car. But if she wasn't there to let me drive her car, I would have to go get a job to get me a car in order to get a job. So like, at what point do we switch that gear? And again, so I'm agreeing, but I feel like majority of brothers that I talk to who get dumped off in their later 20s and they're called a thud, or they're called whack, or lame, or simp, whatever the words might be that are derogatory. It's like, well, shoot, women have carried you, bro, since you was 19, 18 years old. So bro didn't even have a chance to really see what he was cut like a maid for in the real world yet, because he was getting carried. So even though you grown, you still getting baby. So that's kind of like my thing to throw in the conversation with y'all is like, let's talk about it. We got 30 more minutes. Let's talk.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Baby Boy movie, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's what from his mother, but I get what you're saying. But it's like, we got to understand the difference between being dependent on somebody and like being a partner. Like, so I think the onus is on the person who is just like not freeloading, but just getting away with whatever. Because a lot of guys, we know we can get away with a lot of things with women who are supporting us, especially if they're from our community. I don't want to see us grow. I can speak from my examples, my life experiences, and it's like, I think the responsibility is on the man in that case, like, because when you're taking advantage of a woman's kindness, like, we know that, and that's part of what I was saying earlier about sometimes we gotta tell brothers like, hey, that's not right. Or if I'm not trying to sit here and say I'm perfect and I've had all the great relationships, and no, I do think that we got a responsibility. We have, let me just say this: we have discernment. We do it and we exercise it when we want to. And I think we should be more considerate about exercising that and not taking advantage of women who are really trying to support us. Now, obviously, people are going to date and have fun. I'm not trying to say, like, don't experience women and don't have relationships, but I definitely think women are part of the story. Black women are part of the story, and not necessarily as just a group of people that we depend on or that can carry us. It's about us being able to carry each other. Like you mentioned, I could think about a lot of sisters that have my back. Like what you're saying. Like, I feel like every situation I've been through in life, there was a black woman there. Whether it's my mother, my sister, my auntie, a friend at school that I could call, that I can talk to, that I can bounce ideas off of. And I feel like we at least got to value that and show our appreciation and respect for that by exercising our discernment. There you go. It all came together.
Yeah, I like that. If I can be the wild card for a second, I think that for one, I do appreciate people and women like Shaylin, you know what I mean, who have invited us to this space, who has clearly, she's the only woman on this panel, and she's been sitting back in her house in her mind probably thinking, what are wrong with these brothers? And you know what I'm saying? No, I'm just joking. And if not that, she probably has had some, bouts with self trying to figure out what could we do to help the brothers, and this is one of those avenues. But to be the wild card, I would say that I'm somebody who's been extremely absent. I said celibate, but we'll say extremely abstinent. You know what I mean? And the reason why I say I'm a wild card in that, because I really don't feel like there's a lot of men that are practicing like that. You know what I'm saying? But the one thing that I can say that it has really done for me, it for one has allowed for me to place my personality before my sexuality. It's allowed for me to place my duties as a man. You know what I'm saying? It's allowed me to respect women even more, like to really see these women for who they are, to really see people for who they are. Because again, I'm not approaching them from this mentality of what can I get out of them if I lay it on them? You know what I mean? Just to be real, like what can I do? I've seen so many manipulative men, and I've had so many manipulative men in my life that I've seen do women so dirty to the point where I know for a fact, me being sane, I don't want to do that. And some people I'd be like, he's crazy. He's got to be crazy. You know what I'm saying? But And true enough, a lot of them are suffering from mental illness. And see, that's another thing. So I sit back and I watch all of that. I see the violence, like firsthand, seeing the violence, you know what I'm saying? And being caught in the middle of it in so many instances that could be from childhood all the way up until 2 years ago. You know what I'm saying? I'm like in between, you know, you got your friends, they start getting into it, and you be like, oh, I'm in the wrong place at the wrong time. But it's one of those things that makes you step back and be like, for one, all of that worth it? Like, is it really worth it? That's me asking y'all for real. Like, is it worth it?
Well, I'll weigh in. And you talking about wild card, I'm gonna bring up some things that may be a little controversial, right? If we're gonna go down this path. So there's a woman, I think her name's Dr. Patton. She wrote she basically has been on this series, but she wrote a book basically telling black people that they shouldn't beat their kids, right? And of course, a lot of black folks were up in arms. It was powerful. I heard her interview. I had to listen to it twice, right? Because it was convicting. And what she really highlighted, she's now starting to go down this path of when you look at a lot of these men and you look at, and I brought up the book last time, Shay, if you remember, Brainwashed, right? Brainwashed was, dispelling the myth of black inferiority. One of those chapters was related to the relationship between black men and black women. A lot of that stems from slavery, right? And so a lot of that comes from the fact of we were taught to not trust one another, and we were taught to have these divisions and wedges put in. And then you put that in an arena, in the case of saying beating black kids for discipline. Oftentimes we talk about missing fathers, right? Who was the person that raised you? Your mother, right? Well, in that case there, she served as the mother and father. So she, of course, is a source of love, but she also is a source of other things that are not considered positive. And you throw that notion of not having value in yourself, right? It goes back to self. It goes back to, being introspective. You cannot treat other people well if you don't treat yourself well, right? So it just so happens that the black women are the target because they're the closest one to you, right? And they're the easiest target because they are the closest one to you. But in reality, it's because you're missing that, going back to what Shay was highlighting and what you all brought up, that self-help, that self-love or self-love, and focusing on your own value. You have to get rid of that white supremacy that's in you. And I hate to put it that way, but that's really what I think a lot of times is at the root.
I love this. All of you guys are dropping just so much. My brain is just churning here. And we definitely have a lot of people in the chat, and I'm getting messages over like, yeah, we got to watch this later. I heard some things.
That's what's up.
Miss Scott, if you can allow me to say something real quick, like
yes, please do.
Brother Patterson was saying as well, like there's three significant seasons that I feel like every man is going to go through, and every man on this call can agree with me, and may be in one right now. A man has to go through a season of a broken heart. A man has to go through his season of broken pockets. Then a man has to go through a season of a broken pride. His identity has to be shattered in some type of way, and I'm going to work my way back. And that season where his identity is shattered, where he has to take that avatar off, he has to pull out that mirror on your couch, in your car, wherever the case may be, and you got to take a look at yourself. And you might see some stuff that's ugly. You might see some stuff you don't like. You might see some stuff you like. And then you got to figure out, how do I take this broken image of myself and step out into the world and make it look like I'm all good, and figure out what my best step is going to be. He's going to take that broken pocket and figure out, how do I take what I have that I've been gifted or I'm good at, and be able to pay my rent, have a car that's halfway decent to drive, to be able to have a woman who wants to get in the car with me that I drive, to be able to be what the society says is a successful man when I have empty pockets, where there is a hole in that particular pocket. How do I take this broken heart, this idea or imagery that I thought was real, or this fantasy that I created in my mind, in my head, with this other individual person, and ever find love again, and ever have the confidence to be that naked with another person? Those are 3 specific seasons that I feel like every man has to go through in life. And the sooner he goes through them, I'm an advocate for the warrior, the better. Because what ends up happening when you don't learn your lesson in the season that you're supposed to learn it is you end up relearning and going back to school at age 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, whatever the case may be, every year trying to learn the same lesson over and over again. So that's why you see 50-year-olds who don't want to embrace the young brothers who might be 25 years younger than my age or whatever the case may be, because there's still lessons that they trying to learn, and things that they still trying to process that they didn't get in that particular season. So I'm gonna just tie it back together. What Brother Patterson was saying is like, at the end of the day, I'm gonna always be an advocate for that self-reflection for men. Our responsibility and our mental health and our wellness is not fixated on women. It's not fixated on even our past and our parents. We can only look into the things that are ahead and work on ourselves to make ourselves better for those who are impacting around us, whether you're married, single, got kids or not. So like that's just my thing is, and all that we're saying with solutions is first and foremost for anything that's watching, look at yourself. Like look at yourself first, because your biggest project that you have in this world is to become a better version of you. And if you haven't taken that time to look at yourself first for what you like and what you don't like, that's going to make your journey and process that much harder, because those 3 lessons are going to continue. It's just going to be a new moment. It's just going to be a new lost job. You're just going to get laid off or furloughed or something else, or you hate your industry. It's just going to be a new broken, shattered identity when you don't get that promotion because your avatar didn't work. Your Greek fraternity that you were part of didn't get you in the door, or your HBCU or whatever the case may be. So now you got to look at, well, shoot, maybe I need to learn some more. Maybe I need a new certification. Maybe I need to go back and make myself more of a valuable man. And that's where the conversation comes with this whole high value man. So let's get into it.
Kobe dropping gems, man.
Let me jump in.
All y'all dropping so much gems. I haven't been saying much. These brothers got like books and podcasts in them, and I just want to salute all of. But I agree. I mean, Kobe did a whole dissertation on those 3 points that every man has to go through, and hopefully, if they're listening in this whole conversation of mental health, right? Don't be when you go through those 3 stages. Like that's your time to elevate. It's some, like Kobe said, it's a lesson, but it's what you do with it. It don't have to be repeated, right? Yeah. So sit there, feel all the emotions that come with it. But like Kobe said, look at yourself in the mirror and say, all right, this is where I'm at, this is where I'm about to go. And I've been through each 3 of those phases, and I've seen my life skyrocket as a result of that. And so it's all about how you look at it in mental health. I think it kind of all ties in. So I just want to piggyback off of that because I can personally relate that my life didn't ascend until I went through each of those phases that Kobe just mentioned.
Hey, I got to jump in. Great point, Solomon. Kobe, you laid it out. It was like a dissertation. I'm looking forward to seeing the book. I want the audio, but I want to listen to it when I'm working out. You understand? Yeah. That was powerful, very powerful. And I want to add to what you're saying, if I can, because you laid it out so perfectly. I do want to say looking in the mirror is the hardest thing to do. Like, this is not an easy task. And a lot of times it's easier for us to be critical of other people, like point the finger. We can look on TV and saying, well, LeBron isn't doing what he's not doing, his headband, whatever. We can point out all these things. But when it comes to looking at ourselves in the mirror, it's like we start to be nice. We start to ignore things. And sometimes you can look at yourself in the mirror for years, and your problem, you're just constantly ignoring it because you just don't want to be that honest. You don't want to admit that something's wrong with you. You want to, I don't know if I can find the right words to say what we do is like looking at ourselves in the mirror. Sometimes we just scratch the surface. And I would just want to encourage anybody who's listening to go beyond scratching the surface. Be just as critical as you are to other people, because that honesty and that's going to really lead to change and self-love. And we got to be brutally honest with ourselves.
Right. And I wanted to say, chime in real quick, because that was a good one too. I mean, when you think about it, self-talk, the importance of self-talk and how you talk to yourself should not be how you talk to the person that you hate or the person that you can't stand, you should really monitor how you talk to yourself, because all of those things begin to manifest for real. And it comes out verbally towards other people. It comes out in the work that you produce. And it really, in the end, it doesn't help you grow at all. So like you said, the word that I was thinking of, that it was avoidance. You looking in the mirror and you avoid even talking to yourself, because again, for one, you don't want to sound crazy. You know what I mean? I don't. But then two, you don't want to feel like you are being too critical of yourself when really you should be. You know.
I'm telling you, Jesus. y'all, y'all have me speechless, and that's hard to do. Like,
We're
have me
unpacking. We're on a
speechless.
whole trip today.
Right? Like, this is amazing. I'm loving the conversation. I have girlfriends and those who are around me who are always, of course, we always talk about the guys and how they doing, how they treat you, how it's going in life. And the topic always comes up. He don't show me how he feels. He don't talk to me about how he's feeling. I don't think men have emotions, but we all know you have this range of emotions, and this you have a way of regulating those emotions when it comes to things. But what is a safe way or a comfortable way for your significant other or for someone close to your life to just be okay having those conversations with you
Mm-hmm.
from our side? Just thinking about the ladies.
If I could just real quick, I think when I heard you say that, I think it's always important for us to feel that it's a safe space to be able to communicate. And safe could be defined depending upon the brother, right? But safe space meaning, how do we know what you will do with what we share with you? Will you use it as a
Mm-hmm.
weapon? If we reveal
Hold
kind of the
on.
source of our strength, will you cultivate that? Will you cover that? Will you or will you use that to your advantage? And so I think that just for me, if I'm noticing signs that you can't handle that for the sake of protecting myself and protecting you, I might not share. And so that's just me and my opinion. But I know the brothers, they may add context. But just in summary, we got to feel safe. And I think that if women want to know, just say, just simply say, what do you need to feel safe to be able to communicate? And that brother will tell you based off his needs.
And it's about
Wow.
consistency, dude. You are nailing it. I've had this conversation recently, man. I'm telling you, and Shay, you just highlighted it. Men are actually extremely emotional. And as a matter of fact, I would say we're conditioned and socialized not to express those emotions and handle them very well, right? And so we're given a very narrow, window of being able to express what those emotions are. And going back to what Solomon is highlighting is that safe space. It's about consistency. What will you do? Man, there's times, of course, everyone talks about men being, physical, right? Because we're physical by nature oftentimes. Women know how to use those words,
Mm-hmm.
right? And man, depending on, it'll be that one time where you expressed yourself, and we saw it. I think Kobe, you highlighted it about bullying. Part of the black diaspora, being black is playing a dozen, right? Being able to
Mm-hmm.
have the
Yeah.
ability to tear somebody down, right, with your words. And so, from a black male perspective, if you have not consistently demonstrated to him that is off limits, you truly have provided a safe space, he's going to bottle that up. And as a matter of fact, that's actually more detrimental to himself, right, than not, because while he's bottling up, he's going to lie to himself. That's the 11th commandment, right? Thou shalt not fool yourself. Right? He'll lie to himself saying he's good, he's all right, and he's not all right. He's going to keep stuffing it down. He said, it's cool, you didn't hurt my feelings, right? And then all of a sudden it comes out in all sorts of different ways. So man,
Yeah.
Solomon, you definitely you nailed that right on the head, man.
Definitely. And don't force us into it. Don't force us or manipulate us into a conversation on revealing our innermost. You know what I mean? Especially because we, on the other hand, can sense when it's self-serving. It's not always for us in our healing because you're trying to help us grow. Sometimes it's because you're trying to figure us out. I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with you yesterday. I'm trying to see what this, it's like, why are you not talking to? It's like, you know what? I can sense all of that. And men can be stubborn, yes, because again, we don't want to be manipulated into conversation that we don't feel comfortable with giving in the first place. Like he said, that he brought up a good point. You will or possibly may weaponize it. You know what I'm saying? And no one wants to give you the ammo. You know what I mean? I don't want to give it to you. And so, and I don't want you to force it from me either. You know what I mean? But so it's like you got to kind of go with the current sometimes too. Sometimes, yeah, you do need somebody who's going to pull it out of you sometimes, because now we're just going too long. You're not telling me, you know what I mean? This can't go on forever. But then again, you have to be able to gauge it and say, okay, and then be creative. Women need to be creative with their ways and doing it, not manipulative, but creative in ways and, approaching the conversation or introducing the conversation and creating a space for y'all to do it.
This is it's a lot happening here, right? Solomon, Amal, Andre, y'all hit on some great points. I'm gonna take it in a slightly different direction
Mm-hmm.
because I think part of this conversation goes back to seeing Black women as adversaries as opposed to partners. Sometimes, right? Because I get it. We've been in situations where, look, we as Black men, we feel like everybody's out to get us. Sometimes we feel like, what was that chart you had with the 4 circles and violence and poverty and some other things?
Oh.
Yeah, that one. Like we feel like with all that, that's heavy. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So when we feel like, the money, somebody's trying to scam us, somebody's trying to get us. If I don't walk through this neighborhood with my shoulders upright, somebody will think I'm a sucker. Somebody gonna try to rob me, take me out. So like we always got this almost paranoia. Honestly, that's the best word that I can use to describe it. And I'll be honest with my brothers on this call and anybody who's listening. I'll be honest. I still got that in me.
Yeah.
I still got that in me from my sports days and just always trying to compete with people, even my own brothers at times and people in my community. And just, I still got that in me. And I honestly had to look to myself today and say, my wife's not my adversary. I can't look at her as my adversary just because we have a contentious conversation or just because we're talking about something heavy and I feel like I got to focus on me and she has to focus on her. And if I focus on whatever she's going through, does that mean I'm taking away from what I need to focus on? And I was like, no. I had to check myself and say, hey, she's not my adversary. And I can't even entertain the notion that she is or dress up that in a different way where I ignore that is kind of where a lot of my thoughts may be coming from. Not necessarily intentionally, but I had to just make sure I was checking myself like, wait, am I considering her my adversary? Because in my mind, some of the thoughts that I may be having are some thoughts I'll be having if I'm competing with somebody for a job or if I'm racing against somebody. I'm going to take you out like it's me or you. And I'm like, I don't want to be that way. And that's something I'm learning still, that I can't be like it's me or you. It can be me and you, and we can walk together and walk in separate paths, but still be connected and not feel like we're competing against each other. Now, I hope that made sense because being completely vulnerable and open. But I gotta throw that out there because Solomon, you spot on because we don't like you all are spot on. We don't want to feel like we're being taken advantage of. But at the same time, we also gotta help create that safe space. And
But so that has to
acknowledge some of
happen
those
before
insecurities
marriage,
we have.
though, right? I mean, I think it's because marriage. The assumption is that there's a level of trust that has already been built up, by that time, right? Well, we have to practice that, and I think you bring up a great point, right? In the sense that we've got to practice. How do we actively have discernment and say, okay, this is the time that I'm going to go ahead and instill, that level of trust a little bit, and play with that leading up to that man. And that's something that I wish I learned early on. So I'm speaking from experience. I'm not speaking from, I've been carrying this wisdom. I think all of us are speaking from experience where, that's not how society has taught us to operate, right? We didn't have the tools. Now you have had select people that are just, back to Kobe's point where, it just so happened he had that wisdom, right? He had that wisdom, or he got struck with that, that epiphany, or just so happened to have that one mentor that drop that knowledge on them, but that goes back to the older men or the men that have the scars, that have the bruises, need to go back to the younger men, right? And have those conversations like by intent, not happenstance, not, hey, it just so happened I ran across this brother. And no, you intend to say, look, I'm going to bestow on y'all things that I wish I knew when I was in my 20s or when I was in my 30s. And I think that needs to happen much more, especially within the context of relationships with women. Is those are things that a lot of brothers can tell you, man, I wish I'd approached my relationship very differently.
So
You
what
know what I
I'm
mean?
hearing, what I'm hearing is from the majority of the guys here on the call is in February when we do Brothers Brown and book series on
Mhm.
love is an act of resistance. You guys will come on and talk about
Yeah,
Act of
yeah,
love
resistance.
and
I
definitely,
see
relationships.
what you did there.
definitely.
No, I'm trying to rein.
Okay.
And hopefully by that time, maybe it'll all be in person and we can actually have a full on event. I would
Mhm.
love that space. So
That'd be
we're
great.
gonna see what
Yeah,
February looks like. If COVID lets us be great. I know we are running down on time and I want to be mindful of everyone's time for sure. And for everyone here that's on the call, if you have anything that you want to share to our viewers or listeners, um, any last minute words you want to say, anything, any books, any events you have coming up you want to share, feel free to do so. And before we wrap up, I always want to make sure that we end with a quote, and I want to make sure our viewers have resources when it comes to mental health too.
mhm.
Anything you guys want to share?
uh, if anybody needs notary services, I just got my commission. Okay, so and I'm in the state of Texas. I mean, well, yeah. So in the state of Texas, and I'm in Dallas. So you know what I mean. And also too, I'll be trying. In about 2 weeks, I'll be able to go remote, so I'll be able to do it in other cities too. But definitely my website. I hope we can just kind of attach it to the podcast. But yeah, that. And then I was in the studio not too long ago. Hopefully, y'all can go get my little single. You know what I'm saying? But other than that, nah, that's everything else. I hope to keep everybody posted. I love the panel. Like you guys have really become good guys to fellowship with, and I really do appreciate the conversation. I like each and every one of you. Honestly, I really do.
Likewise. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Okay, nothing else. It's your time to speak. I'm giving you the spotlight. No books
I
are
know
going.
I know the entrepreneurs. I know they got to do they want too. But definitely go ahead. And I know y'all doing some great things. Y'all got books. Y'all got businesses. Like, I don't have anything. I don't have any announcements. Like I'm very appreciative of the brothers, the whole conversation. Shout out to you, Shaylin, for putting us together. I'll definitely come out
Yeah,
to Dallas. I got an auntie out there. I love to meet and talk to y'all in person, break bread with
yeah,
y'all, share a meal together. Let's get real together. So that's all I have to say.
definitely.
Thank you all.
No, just thank
Hmm.
you. Likewise, thank you for this opportunity, and look forward to having more of these types of conversations.
Yeah.
Love it.
Absolutely.
Love it. Thank you all. Well, okay. Well, I definitely, like I say, I want to make sure we're wrapping up our last few moments. So, a few things to keep in mind, resources for everybody. There's a website called therapyforblackmen.org. It gives you a full plethora of resources that exist when it comes to therapy options for you, from sliding scale to therapists of color to therapy in your particular region. And another resource to keep in mind too, if you're looking for mental health resources, to look at your local colleges. Your colleges often have schools of counseling where they work directly with, sometimes they partner with local counselors in the region to provide sliding scale or free counseling services. And sometimes it's through the students themselves that are observed by professionals. So you're never alone. It's never as if it's just someone you're talking to. These are licensed professional counselors that are happy to help you. And oftentimes, especially because of COVID, it's free. So take a look at your local colleges, take a look at the resources for therapyforblackmen.org, or feel free to reach out to bookmecca.org as well for any resources. I'd be happy to connect you with a plethora of services too. Also, our discussion will be on YouTube, so you can catch the replay. Feel free to watch it again anytime that you have any questions over literature, books, anything by Black authors. Feel free to hit me up for sure. And last but not least, I wanted to share this with you guys too. Oh, hold on. Let me take that off of there. There we go. King's Guide to Self-Care, prayer, meditation, therapy, getting rid of toxic masculinity, pampering yourself, building connections with brothers like we have on here today, and daily affirmations. Just some of the ways, therapy for Black men, some of the ways that you can support yourself and others around you as well. And Black Men Loving Black Men is the Revolutionary Act. So thank you all for being in attendance. I appreciate your time. And I look forward to next time we see each other, February. So, all right, guys. Well, we're gonna wrap it up. And thank you, Book Mecca family. We love you.
Peace.
Take care, guys.